Well, hello, friends and neighbors. John, your whiskey neighbor here. Welcome down to the Nook. It is Canada Day, and as I said leading up to this day, I wanted to shoot and share some great Canadian whiskeys with all of you so you could think of something maybe to have on the deck today. So today we are going to look at Wiser's 23-year-old Cask Strength. Came out in 2019, part of the Northern Border collection. So when you get back, we'll talk about this bottle, but I also want to say, I hope that this Canada Day is a little different for all Canadians, that we are seeking to connect, remember, and be respectful of all people here on the land, especially the Indigenous First Nations people, and that we are looking and seeking ways to talk, to listen, and to build a stronger Canada together. But when we come back, we'll talk whiskey, and we'll talk this 23-year-old J.P. Wiser.
3, 4.
As I said in the opener, I want to talk about some of the great Canadian whiskey that's going on, and this time we're going to talk about, one of the Northern Border Collection rare release series. This is the J.P. Wiser 23-year-old Cask Strength, 64.3%. And what I know of the whiskey isn't a lot. I understand that it's mostly corn, mostly older corn. 23-year-old corn that was probably double distilled, as they do for a lot of their base corn whiskey, but then aged significantly longer than they would for any of their other blends. But then there is some rye in here. Now, what I don't know about the rye is if the rye is also 23 years old, which would be unusual for rye, or if they've used that 1 part per 10 that you can in Canada and used a younger rye to perk up some of the flavor in here. But it's mostly corn, 23 years old, and some rye. I don't know about the casks either. I wish I did. The corn likely reused casks, but the rye often, Dr. Don, often that team ages their rye in new oak. But I don't know. If you do, maybe comment down below. Now let's talk something that maybe I know something about, whiskey. First, it's going to be this floral, light, you think you're going, oh, total Canadian whiskey. And that is what we're doing. But it also already has kind of some musty, spicy things going on. Yeah, some light fruits, like some really light fruits, let's just say that. Very nice nose. Absolutely reminiscent of some of the high wood that I've had recently, but I will say for me, even though it's 64% alcohol, there is a little less ethanol, or I think Dr. Don, he gets geeky right away and talks about that ethyl acetate that builds up as whiskey ages very long in wood, and it can come off as a very, very sweet smelling, almost a glue. But I don't get that in here. This is a nice, light cooked apple, sweet buttered corn, spicy on the edges there, and that was strong alcohol, but not a weird off alcohol. Let's see what this 2019 Cask Strength tells us on the palate. Hope you have something. Cheers. That's a fantastic whiskey. It is bright with flavor. It's got light fruit again, a little floral note, sweet vanillas, good spice, structure from, it's a lot of alcohol. So part of my tongue going, woohoo, is definitely all the alcohol, but it is tasty. It finishes in a way, it's hugging, it's drying slightly, and it makes you think, oh, what would that second sip taste like? gingerbread spices, cinnamons. Gonna try another little sip. Wow. Certainly a corn-forward whiskey. You definitely get that corn husk, you know, a high sweetness that can be a little confectionery sugar that I get with corn, but it's still coating, and there's good spice from maybe that younger rye. It's well selected. This is fantastic whiskey, really good. And I know it's hard to find. Now you'll find the 22-year-old aged or finished in port. But if you can find this and you like Canadian whiskey at all, this is fantastic. It's probably, well, it's absolutely one of the best Canadian whiskeys I've ever had. Let's try it with some water, compare it to their 35-year-old release ahead. But I just want to say, if you see this on the shelf still and you're thinking, oh, I don't know, you know, because it goes for sometimes $150. It is the kind of whiskey that's worth $150. Now that says a lot, knowing that a lot of what I review here on the channel is $50 whiskey. So this is far outside my regular price range. That said, I was keeping this back for something like Canada Day, where I wanted to share something I feel unique and really just amazing. And this is amazing. So as happens with water, and you need to, I suggest, let it sit. Like when I poured this, easy 20 minutes more. And now that I've added water, you should really you should let it sit even another 10 minutes, because one of the first things that I find when I hit it with water is actually like an alcohol bloom, which really dissipates out of the glass. The nose is significantly sweeter. We are now in that maple syrup, a little bit confectionery sugar. It's definitely wrapped up in sweet, light caramels, lots of vanilla. On the palate with water. Now the fruits moved. Instead of, I was getting kind of an apple on the other one, now I'm getting a, like sweeter, so I guess maybe more like a pear. Like whatever you would move into, which is like, okay, not as dry crisp as an apple, but what would be a little sweeter fruit. So adding water to this is a must. You really, at 65%, you need to find where it is that your palate's going to find the right secondary flavors. It's going to be enjoyable. It's not just going to be burning, because certainly the burny hug is gone. It has certainly moved in a much sweeter palate for me. Sweeter fruits, lighter oaks, sweeter light toffees, vanillas. So I definitely would try. Well, you don't have to, but I mean, really, it needs water to find exactly where you like it. I think it tends to move into the sweeter nature with water. If I was rating this, like, I haven't given out a 5-star in a very, very long time, because I suddenly, I don't know, it was a year or so ago, realized how good whiskey could get. And some of the 5 stars I was throwing out in the first few years of the channel, I'm like, yeah, those are great, 5 stars. But this is as close to a 5-star I think that you can get right now in Canadian whiskey. It is fantastic for my palate. I truly enjoy it. Now, I generally would like the spicier, heartier rye and the cask strength rye. So, you know, I could bring it down for that. But if you're thinking Canadian whiskey, but you would like to know, like, how good can it get, this is just about there. That's some pretty high praise. Speaking of high praise, this is Wiser's, the last of a sample that I have. Wiser's 35-year-old. Now this, I saw some casking, which was double distilled corn, carried all the way up to 35 years old, and then they did add rye, but it was younger. I don't know the age, and the rye for sure was in virgin oak. So sounds pretty similar. Now this is released at 50%, but 35-year-old corn. Let's see what we get. Boy, it is a gentler nose, even than this watered down one here. This is nice, pretty sweet right now, but lively. 35-year-old, I'm looking for a little more shadow influence of cask. It's just more relaxed on the nose. It's enjoyable. It's got all that flavor profile, but far more relaxed. The sugars are constrained. The fruits have moved right back down to more like a cooked apple. And the rye spice is just cloying, but it's hardly there on the nose. Let's try it on the palate. Cheers. In this sitting, I am getting stronger oak. I'm getting a light char oak. In the middle, a bit of wood. And at the end, the sweet oak that I'm getting on there. There's really, oak to everyone's palate is a little bit different. For me, there's sort of these different styles of oak, and sipping that takes me through all of them. The fruit's also maybe even a light cherry. Let's try it again. Or apricot. Beautiful, well structured, lots of flavor. There's probably more layers of flavor here than the 22. Better try the 22 again. So in comparison with the 35-year-old, the 22 is becoming hotter and with more pepper and more spicing. I like spicing in my whiskey, and probably why I was really drawn to this. I haven't, except for now live with you guys, haven't had this 35-year-old in over a year. Trying it again, this is also fantastic Canadian whiskey. So maybe take everything I've just said today with a grain of salt. I obviously enjoy these whiskeys. Maybe move this back down to that 4.5 stars, because this has to be at that 4.5, 4.75 star for sure. Man, really, these are 5-star Canadian whiskeys for me. I'm just trying to be reasonable so you have any credit on the street, but I really like these whiskeys. I do. I love this 35-year-old. It's got a depth of flavor and a layered fruit palate and some interesting oak treatment that I don't remember getting before. But this is bright and peppery, but still like good all the way through. Like, doesn't put you off with any of those too much ethyl acetate or too much, strange or off notes. These are just solid Canadian whiskeys. I hope you have, some good Canadian whiskey or something good to enjoy this day. It's very likely, if you're in Canada, a holiday for you. But if you follow news media or are listening to the community, it is a different Canada Day than I think we've ever had. I do encourage all Canadians to authentically read, listen, talk with Indigenous peoples and hear about the intergenerational trauma, the horror of residential schools. We need to acknowledge that, we need to understand, and we need to work together to begin to honestly heal from it, whatever that takes, for however long it takes. We will address it, and if we address it together and openly and not in a reactionary fashion, there's hope that we can build the Canada that we deserve, all of us. Hope you have a fantastic week.